Scott Bass. Let's welcome our partners NVS Fins to the show this morning.
Yes, Naked Vikings fins. Our friends Leif and Jamin. Great customer service. And of course, the thing about fins, David, as you know, is that you're going to unlock secret codes to your surfboards when you put in different fins. And you must, as a surfer, bring your fins to the beach, put them in your car, catch a couple waves, come in, change out your fins. You're going to unlock some secrets to surfboards. And during the Lexus Pipe Pro, David, which I know we're going to talk about today, they spoke about different types of fins and boards, the way the quad is going to work in the barrel versus the way a three fin is going to work. And there's benefits to both. So do yourself a favor, check out the entire line of NVS fins and, you know, consider a whole quiver of NVS fins and unlock secret codes.
I think one thing we are past due with doing is bringing to the people the story of how they landed on Naked Viking Surf as a brand name.
Yeah, let's flesh that out.
Do you know the story?
I mean, I sense somewhere, I don't know the story, but my gut feeling is somewhere there was like like a, what is that stuff? Ayahuasca. There was like a ayahuasca ceremony and Jamin found himself, with a handful of fins running through the running down the beach at Blacks going, yes. I don't know.
Eureka! I found Valhalla.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know the story myself, but I really do feel like there has to be a story because it's such an unconventional name. But like, what does a Viking have to do with surfing? And then how do they end up naked? But we will get to the bottom of this. They are a seafaring folk. We know that much.
Yes.
But I always thought of them with clothes on. So we're going to get to the bottom of this. We will report back next week. But Naked Viking is Naked Viking Surf, I think is their Instagram handle. You can find them. Or nvsfins.com is their website. You can also purchase them, by the way, at our beloved retail partner, realwatersports.com, where they are almost always wearing clothing.
Yeah. Well, clothing in a retail environment's a good idea. It's positive.
We got to showcase the product.
Yes. Well, look, Real Water Sports Naked Viking Fins. What a great combination.
Yeah, you can get anything you need for any water sport, not only surfing, but kiting, foiling. We see everybody wearing helmets now at the pipe event. Um, they invested heavily in a helmet inventory a couple of years back. And so if you're in the market for a helmet for kiting even or foiling or surfing, they've got a variety of styles. So go check out Real Water Sports for all of your water needs.
As we see some movement at the takeoff zone, it's Kelly Slater grabbing rail.
Yeah, guy. Yeah, guy. Yeah, guy. Yeah, yeah, guy. What's up, bro? Yeah, this is Spit. This is the Spit podcast. David and Scott, we're adults and we talk all things surf.
Why did you have to qualify that? We're
Just,
adults.
just in case anyone's like, who are these idiots? Well,
Like
let me just
what
say
was the guttural
singular,
yaga?
maybe singular, maybe who is this idiot? What's that? What was your question?
Simultaneously guttural yaggying while wearing cashmere.
I had somebody call me the other day and go, "Hey, what's the backstory on the yeah guy?" And I was like, "Well, it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek call back to our days in high school when we would say yeah guy with, a sort of a pride, if you will. It sort of separated us from the jocks." Which, by the way, I don't even think there's a separation anymore. I think the jocks and the surfers have commingled, and it's just all one unit of student body at high schools. But back when I was around, there was definite chasms. There was, surfers, and then there was jocks, and then there was stoners. And I guess there was a bit of commingling between the stoners and the surfers, perhaps. There's a bit of Jeff Spicoli, right, in the whole yeah guy call out. And of course, it's a tongue in cheek thing here with David and I. But yeah, it's just, look, let's kick off the show with something fun.
I think it's interesting the etymology of yagai in Southern California. I have a feeling that it populated organically in each individual community on its own. Like, I'm not sure that it happened first in a location and then slowly traveled to the other locations. I think there is something innate in a surfer when you're sitting on the beach or in the parking lot and a friend or somebody you just know from the lineup runs past going to the ocean. It's an instinctual thing just to be like, yeah, guy. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, that's the only appropriate response in that moment. You can't say, hey, have a great day, Charles. You know what I'm saying? The only thing that comes out of your mouth is, yeah, and then follows up with guy for some reason.
I would sense, like I said, I think there's a Jeff Spicoli. I feel like Spicoli is a part of the germination of that phrase throughout the or the California lineups, parking lots, if you will, in say 1977 or whenever it took off. I want to say that's the period, right? Was it 1979? That's when it, So my sense is Spicoli had something to do with it. Do you think that that's correct?
The Spicolification of surfing may have had something to do with it, but I don't remember Jeff Spicoli ever saying, yeah, guy.
I don't either. And but for some reason I'm drawn to Spicoli.
It's representative of that era for
It
sure.
definitely is,
So I have a question then. Do you think that yeah, guy, is there a geographical boundary of where that stopped? Like, were they saying it in Santa Barbara? Were they saying it in Santa Cruz? Or do they have their own
That's a
version?
good question. I sense that it may have stopped in northern Los Angeles based on nothing other than my gut intuition here. I'm of the belief that the yeah guy phrase, and I'm of course wrong based on your theories, started in northern San Diego County, specifically at Seaside Reef. Specifically, it was first uttered from the mouth of Todd Martin. But again, I could be wrong. It could have been, uh, who knows? That's
Well,
just my, you know, blinders on sense of surf word etymology.
it could be true, or it just could be that was your first encounter, and so that's your worldview on it.
Yeah.
I just wonder,
I do
and
know
I,
this. I sense that John Parmenter also said it up in Huntington
yeah,
Beach. You know
that's
what
what I'm
I mean?
saying. Yeah.
And I think when John Parmenter and Todd Martin were surfing in NSSAs at the age of 15 or 16, I think Dino and Dino probably said it as well. Like I sense that there was you're right. It populated, possibly came down from a UFO.
Well, the question then is, an hour south of you, was there somebody at the same time saying, "Si, senor"?
This is a great question. Great
It's
minds need
it's
to.
very possible. I mean, the exact same utterance. It gurgles up from inside when you see somebody running down to the beach, and so it makes sense that they would be saying that too.
Yeah. Well, hopefully one of our listeners will chime in with their own sense of where they first encountered the phrase as a young lad.
Or if you're on the East Coast, what's your version? Did you have something that you grew up with? Was it yeah guy? Was it different?
Y'all guy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we got to the bottom of nothing with that. We solved
Yes.
nothing, but we
No.
tried.
Yeah. Well, let's talk what's really the tip of the spear here, which is the Lexus Pipe Pro 2025, the kickoff event of the WCT 2025 season. And wow, what a great few final days of surfing, David. What are your thoughts?
Well, let's start with the final. Let's work backwards and start with the final. The final was absolutely insane in the
Yeah.
best possible way. The final ended in a tie. I mean,
Oh my God.
if you want to talk about, excitement and being close, this literally ended in a tie. And the final heat score, I surprisingly don't have it written down. It was like it's a high 17-point total.
1787 or something like that.
1787. So,
Yeah.
um, it's a high scoring heat. And then it, of course, ended in a tie. Barron Mamiya had the highest scoring wave. So Barron Mamiya won the final of the men's on a count back. Tyler Wright won the final of the women's over Caitlyn Simmers. But let's talk about the final itself, I think. And let's talk about Barron Mamiya. Is this an
Well,
official? Go ahead.
Yeah, let me say that you're right. It was an incredible final. You often hear me suggest, David, that surfing isn't really a pure sport, mostly due to the subjective nature of the judging. And this final heat was both an argument for it being a great sport and against it being a great sport. And I felt like, as a fan of the sport, as an end user, it was a phenomenal moment with a sport using a capital S, you know. Now, if you're in Leo's camp, you're probably not feeling that way. You're feeling like it was a worse moment in sport, perhaps. But what we had was two fighters going at it in pretty good pipeline, both in top form, with a blowout heat early on. And then Leo, of course, comboed. Premature celebrations happening in the broadcast booth, perhaps, and definitely on the beach. And then this incredible comeback by Leo. He had us on the edge of our seats, David. It was like a Tom Brady 2 minute drive down the field in football. Time was clicking down. Leo did everything right. He scored a touchdown, and then the touchdown was waved off by the referees, metaphorically here. What an incredible final! It boiled down to Leo's final waves. Was it committed enough, David? Maybe set up the listeners a little bit. I sense that the judges really love commitment, and a wave that requires you to put your arm in it and stall at the beginning to find the barrel doesn't necessarily shout out commitment. But there was a sense that the judges got it wrong. Ross Williams, a noted North Shore local, former CT surfer, broadcaster, analyst, coach, called it the best wave of the heat twice. Um, I I sense that overall, Barron Mamiya was far and away the best surfer of this event, but that's not what we had here. Um, but I don't know. It was such a close call. I mean, it speaks to the final score being a tie. It's kind of, and I'm sure that you've teased this apart, and I'd love to hear who you think won the final.
So, yeah, I did tease it apart. I feel the judges got it right. I feel Baron Mamiya won the final. I was proud or glad to see the judges not get caught up in the excitement because it was very exciting to see Leo get those two waves. And with that excitement, it's easy to kind of overscore a ride. But when you go back and just look at the two waves or four waves in isolation, Barons were better in my mind. So, kind of to reiterate what you said and to build up the excitement of the heat, Baron got an 8.17. I think it was on the pipe wave. And that was I thought that was a fairly scored wave. Then he got the 9.8, which is the running backdoor right. And like you stated, Baron was like late and on the gas pedal the entire time. When he came out of the barrel, incredibly, there was a section of hit and he smashed that thing. Like went full speed into it, boom, it like and had like air time, not over the lip, but like air time being projected back out, boom, lands it real quick and then falls. That was commitment. That was everything you want to see. The wave wasn't so big, so it didn't get a 10, but he surfed it. That was the best wave of the heat in my mind, and especially when you go back. So Leo, to his credit, with nerves of steel, patiently waited for a high scoring ride. And it took 15 minutes. Or actually, there was 15 minutes left in the heat when he finally got that wave. And he, like you said, had to stall a bit. And it was kind of a long runner, but it wasn't throaty. It wasn't doubled up. The wave itself wasn't a spectacular wave, but he surfed it beautifully. He got an 8.87. Then within 2 minutes, he was back in the lineup and he got a 9-1 on another backdoor wave. So what he needed was a 9.11 to win, and the 9-1, of course, would be the tie, and that's exactly what it was. I think Ross was wrong. I think starting off the wave stalling already sets you kind of lower than a 9 point ride, really, unless the wave goes berserk after that. And that one really didn't. He surfed it beautifully, he paced it beautifully, but I really thought it was even a reach to put it in the 9 range when you compare what Barron scored on his wave. So the judges, I think, got it right. But what was interesting was there was a separation in the judging booth. There's 5 judges. The lowest 2 judges gave it an 8.8, which I agree with, like under a 9. But the high judge gave it a 9.5, which I thought was really suspect, but still not as big as Barron's 9.8. So I think Ross got caught up in the moment. I'm glad to see that the judges didn't because it was a very exciting moment.
it makes me wonder, would Leo, obviously, I guess he would have done himself a favor if he would not have taken off so quickly. Like if you have to stall for the tube, why didn't he just wait a beat or two so that he was underneath the lip at the drop? And would that have made the difference? Or was it such a situation so that if he did wait to be under the lip at the drop, he might not have made it because you needed to be in it early to kind of set the whole thing up and to get up and go and get the gallop going on the horse, so to speak. I don't know.
It's a great question. I didn't consider it because I just presume you're dealing with what the ocean gives you and you're just doing what the wave offers. But now that you say that, you're right. I have been in positions as a surfer where I do delay a takeoff or adjust kind of direction of the takeoff to slip in instead of get in early or whatever it happens to be. So you're right. Leo might have had an option there to make more out of that wave. But that brings up another interesting point. This is something that I felt with Barron versus Italo, which is artistry versus tacticianness. And
Wait a minute.
Ross,
Tacticianness? That
what's
is a
the right
cool
word?
word. I like that word. You know what? Tacticianness.
An artist versus a tactician, rather. And Ross stated throughout the event, anytime Leo was in the water, he'd be like, "This guy is strategy over all things. Like Leo does not fumble the strategy. He's also a great surfer, but strategy is first, and you will never out strategize him." And I'm afraid that does show sometimes in the surfing. And when I mentioned Italo, it's not Italo's strategy, but I felt like Italo versus Barron, there was artistry versus maybe tenacity or something. And I was so glad to see artistry win, where Barron seems to be kind of in tune with the ocean and taking what it gives him and then reply, just responding in the moment to whatever the wave is doing. And Italo, on the other hand, is just going to impose his will on the wave is kind of what it felt like to me. And so seeing artistry win, I felt great about. And then seeing again with Barron and Leo, it's kind of like it just feels one's in sync with the ocean, the other one is playing a game kind of.
Yeah, Baron Mamiya was incredible. I think if there's one wave that for me stands out as, we spoke earlier about, look, Barron was obviously the best surfer of the event. And of course, he was the best surfer in the final. But the first wave in round of 16, it was Barron versus John Florence. It was a left, and he got a 10 on it. And Baron Mamiya, and it was, by the way, it was in one of those heats that they weren't the priority heat. He was past vertical at the drop on this critical heaving, right on the reef, first reef pipe, a free fall drop, his entire body over the nose. The Channel Island surfboard that they made him had a water line on that drop from the very tip of the nose all the way through the tail. I mean, this board was engaged in the wave, the entire rail line. And I think this wave, perhaps more than any other, speaks to Barron's complete mastery, not only of technique. I know you spoke of Idolo's technique, but complete mastery of technique coupled with his experience at the spot. And that was a wave where I just went, wow, you know, um, this guy is right there with a couple of others at this particular spot that, well, I mean, proof is in the pudding. He's got back to back victories there.
So that wave was my favorite wave of the event as well. And you said he's stands shoulder to shoulder with a couple of others. I actually identified that moment as a separation between him and John and everyone else. Um, because them taking off under the lip is different. And look, Jamie O'Brien, one of the all-time greats at pipe. I think this is different than Jamie O'Brien. Jamie O'Brien takes off late and steep, but the way that John has been doing it in recent years and the way that Barron kind of exemplified in that moment is deeper and different and more under the lip. Like the wave was hitting where he took off. The lip ended up hitting the trough at the bottom before he was making it to the bottom. You know what I mean? So that means he took off in a position where it was actually like barreling over him not taking off with the lip and letting it go. He was like taking off with it fully over him and then hitting and bouncing back off the ocean before he even made the drop. So it is unbelievably late and technical. And it was a full pipe TP, like a full proper wave, doubled up. It was incredible. It was a 10-point ride for sure. So, and that's also kind of like we love backdoor, but pipe is that wave at pipe was the wave of the event. So I really feel like Barron and John have separated themselves. And now watching Barron, it's like, is this kind of the changing of the guard? We saw the changing from Kelly and maybe Jamie to John in the last decade. And now I'm almost thinking like, wow, Barron's kind of got John's number in a couple of different heats now. And is this an official transition to the new era?
I mean, it's hard to say that it isn't, you know. Obviously Barron's got you know, John's older. Jamie O'Brien, obviously quite older. Um, I mean, Barron Mamiya right now is the guy, especially on the North Shore. I mean, he's won at Sunset Beach. He's won twice at Pipe. He's probably got other results that I'm not even aware of. And so, you know, we need to see Barron move the needle in other locations.
Well, so
And
that's the other talking point is you said he probably has other results you're unaware of. He actually doesn't. He won he won Sunset, he's won Pipe twice, deservingly, like incredible, but poor results across the world at all other locations. So now that actually can be attributed to something which is worth discussing, which is let's not forget how he got on tour. He did not qualify through the Challenger Series. He got a wild card into Pipe in 2022 and he finished ninth in that event, but he only barely lost to Kelly, and Kelly got like a buzzer beater and barely beat him at the end. So they gave him a wild card. They're like, hey man, great performance at Pipe. We're going to give you a wild card into Sunset. He won that as a wild card. And all of a sudden, the WSL's like, this kid's exciting. Let's bring him around the world. Well, he did poorly throughout the rest of the year. And I think he finished 16th, but that allowed him to qualify for tour in 2023 where he finished 12th. Then he won Pipe last year, but he still finished 14th at the end of last year. So he's getting Midland like uh round of 32nd basically finishes most everywhere in the year, but when you win one or two event that gives you, you know, enough points to get into the qualification. But what the other kind of addendum to that story is the WSL actually amended the rule so that wild cards now cannot accrue points towards qualification. So Barron got in through a wild card qualification, and then they realized, or they just decided, maybe that's not fair, and so we're not going to do that anymore. I would make the argument against the WSL that no, that's actually more exciting because now you have, you know, a specialist going toe to toe with others. But my point to you is that when he found himself on tour traveling the world, he wasn't ready necessarily. He had not been training at those spots. He probably showed up at those spots for the first time, maybe in Western Australia or wherever it was. And so it's a little bit different than somebody who's kind of had their eye on that prize for a period of time and had been prepping and mentally prepping.
yeah, you know, I feel like okay, he's had a couple of years to feel out what the tour is like everywhere else. Um, he's incredible. He's a really great interview. And I bring that up because what I'm saying is that emotionally intelligent, he's there. Like he's not like, oh, cool, let's go on tour and you know,
Yeah.
rage and just see the world and whatever happens, happens. You know, like that's out the window. That's over. Like we need to see results. And when you take somebody like Baron Mamiya, and perhaps you could throw Alan Cleland in this too. You could throw a bunch of people at this. And then you look at the style of Ethan Ewing and you go, okay, I'm taking Ethan Ewing versus the field in just style points. And it's kind of hard for me to equal them. I just feel like Ethan Ewing's style, regardless of the turns, they're all kind of doing the same radical turns, you know? But when you implement the speed and flow, the stuff that doesn't happen between transitions, Ethan Ewing stands out. And I'm bringing Ethan Ewing because into the equation because I think he's the guy.
This is funny. This is
Yeah.
my final takeaway after this event. In my notes, I wrote Ethan Ewing is the best surfer on tour. And he doesn't have any shortcomings in his game. Like, airs, great. Rail, great. Speed, great. Power, great. Style, great. There's no kinks or
Tube riding, both
chinks.
back and front side, great.
Exactly. Exactly. So there will be moments throughout the year where um, it'll work. Something will work against him. Nature. This is just the nature of our sport and the way that a 30-minute heat can operate. And in the round of 16, Kelly Slater capitalized on that moment and he won because Kelly is that good too. But there will be moments throughout any WSL season where the greatest surfer still won't win. And but if you are consistent over the course of the season, that all irons out. And so I'm now pointing at Ethan Ewing as finishing the season in first place going into Cloudbreak and then potentially losing at Cloudbreak actually to a specialist Cloudbreak surfer like John, let's say. But, or John won't be there. But I just think Ethan, for the ways was you stated and just watching him in this event, I really felt like he was the best surfer in the event.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm getting at is like, can these, for lack of a better phrase, these great surfers, and I guess what I'm getting at is Barron a specialist, or can he go out and finally get us some results? I'm not saying win, but we need to see some semis, quite a few of them. You know, like if you're going for a world title, um, you're going to have to meet the same level that Ethan Ewing is putting out there, the same type of gorgeous surfing that Ethan Ewing puts out there. And it's tough to do because people's styles are already ingrained, they're embedded. And by the way, I'm not saying I love the way Barron Mamiya surfs, but
Me too.
when we're talking about the world's best, you know, there's a certain panache that that Barron shows at Pipe, and he's obviously comfortable at Sunset Beach. And so, you know, luckily there's some spots on tour. Chopu Barron needs to semi at the very minimum at Chopu. And what other wave of consequence are we talking about on tour this year?
Cloudbreak as a
Yeah, but
finals
you got to
day
make
event.
you got to make the finals to get there, though. I mean, in the regular, you know, unless
I,
if the box happens to like just be a dominant couple of days, and you know, for competition, that bodes well.
yeah,
Um,
I agree with you. He could
J
dominate
Bay,
out there.
I think Barron can have a result to J Bay that wouldn't surprise.
Well, so to answer your question, is he a specialist? Interestingly, even though he's well rounded and he's got an air game and small wave game, he is a specialist for Hawaii. Like his air game and all of that other stuff, let's say where he would surf incredibly well at in El Salvador on a right hand point break. It isn't with the level of dominance that he has at Pipeline. Like once you talk about him surfing at El Salvador, you then have Griffin Colapinto in that conversation. You have Felipe Toledo. You have 10 or 12, Kanoe Igarashi, 10 or 12 that kind of all are in that same conversation with him. So he's a very well rounded surfer, but he's not head and shoulders above everybody else like he is at Pipe and Sunset. So he's a Hawaii specialist, we could say, with a well rounded game, and that'll keep him in the top 10, maybe even top 5. But I still point to Ethan Ewing as being the superior surfer.
Yeah, well, I just sense that what Barron needs to focus on is getting to Cloudbreak, like get into the field of five, and then a world title's totally within grasp, you
Yep.
know, like, so I don't know how these guys do it. If they look at certain events, if they look at Abu Dhabi and go, okay, probably not going to happen. Here's really where I need a result. I need a result here. Maybe Portugal's a tubing wave, and maybe that's what, you know, like there's going to have to be moments on tour that you're highlighting that you're putting, I'll say pressure, you're putting expectation on yourself. This is where I have to do to get into the top five. Once Barron gets to the top five, he's a favorite to win a world title. And so I would love to see that happen. I think it would be great. He's an incredible surfer, and he's a great ambassador for Hawaii. I think he's just he's obviously intelligent and fun to watch, and so I'm here for it.
Totally here for it. And let's go through his heat totals in this event. 17.97 in the final, 18.9 in the semifinal against Italo, 14.5 in the semifinal or the quarterfinal against Jake, which isn't a huge total, but still respectable. And then 17.97 again in the round of 16 win over John Florence. These are huge totals.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's back-to-back pipe winner. He's 1 or 1A at Pipeline.
Yep. Incredible. Now, it's also worth mentioning Leonardo Fioravanti. Leo's earned his stripes repeatedly. Like, he is a warrior. And I think there is a tiny little lack of panache that's missing that maybe is like he's made the final twice at Pipe, finished second in both. I think that strategic kind of thing that Ross Williams is talking about kind of overshadows his actual surfing prowess because I really can't criticize his surfing in any way. It's the foundation's phenomenal. He's got an air game. He charges. He looks, it's like his style's good, but it just lacks a certain little bit of panache that Ethan has in spades, Barron has at certain venues. But
Well, I think the thing that works against him is he's just a big guy. Like Leo's pretty big, I think. I bet he's 6'1", 180 pounds. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, let's
no,
look it
I
up.
think you're
But
right. Yeah.
like somebody was asking, I was in Florida for the Super Bowl this weekend, and one of my relatives goes, "Hey Scott, how big is there a 6'5" surfer on tour?" And I go, "No." Like I think the biggest guy on tour is Jordy. I think he's 6'2", a buck 85 or something like that.
Yeah.
And there's a reason, and it's tough for big guys to get through an entire year on tour against, the 5'8", the 5'9" guys that are a buck 60 and they're just cut like, Manny Pacquiao. And so I think that might be holding Leo back a little bit. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how big he is. He seems, but you're right. Who's not a Leo fan? Quite frankly, I wasn't necessarily like either way for Leo, but after this event and sort of understanding the backstory that they laid out for us, he's a fun guy to root for. And I found myself going, if the judges were removed from the North Shore geographically, and they were judging that thing from Santa Monica, via remote judging, would the scoring have been different? And or if they were live geographically, if this event was occurring in France and we saw these waves unfold in perfect tubing France beach breaks, would there have been some bias, what I'll call geographical bias? Because if Leo had gotten the score, we'd be having the same conversation. We'd be teasing apart a very nuanced situation, and you could easily go, yeah, Leo won. Like, it wouldn't have surprised me if Leo got the score, is what I'm saying. Like, it was pretty effing close. And so again, I was like, gosh, is there geographical bias? Are the judges, going to Lele's tonight and being concerned about their safety if they get?
No. So the interesting experiment would be if they had judges live as they do, and then also have a separate set of remote judges in Santa Monica, and then seeing how if those scores are similar or different. Because I've made the argument in the past that it should be remote. Like
I know.
because it'll reflect what you and I are seeing. If your vast majority of your audience is online, we want to see, what makes sense to us. We want to see the scores reflect what we're witnessing. So I think that there is, or actually, let me back up. In the WSL's effort to make it objective scoring, that would be a logical way to do it. I personally don't feel like I'd rather have the live experience, but in their objective to do that, then that would make sense to do all the judging remotely. And then the other thing to be clear on is you mentioned Italo's association with France. He's actually Italian, but he did
No,
absolutely.
Leo. You meant Leo.
What did I
I
say?
know, but Belly's in France. Like
Yeah, yeah. He
Leo's
grew
like the guy in France. I
he
mean,
grew up in France, but
yeah, he might as well be.
he waves the
He's the
Italian
local
flag.
favorite. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. But I'm rooting for him as well, and I think he's well rounded and could do well at any venue on tour. There's just not a point of difference in his surfing, you know. Whereas Felipe there is, Italo there is, and that's kind of what separates that top five.
He kind of has, for me anyway, he has sort of an Adriano de Souza sort of quality this year about him. Like he's this blue pale, like this blue collar lunch pail type of vibe around him. He's come back from some pretty serious stuff. He's been on tour long enough. He's putting in the hard work apparently, from what I'm hearing, and he's another guy that, frankly, first of all, if you draw him in a heat, it's scary. Secondly, if he can get into the top five and find himself a cloud break, yeah, he's not the guy you point to and go, oh, yeah, that's the favorite. But could he absolutely win at cloud break? The answer is yes,
Yeah.
which is kind of the beauty of cloud break, right? Is that any of those top five guys, no matter who you are, could win it. Like if Connor Coffin was, you know, whatever it was 4 or 5 years ago, if that was a cloud break, Connor Coffin had a chance, but at lowers, we were like, no, he doesn't have a chance.
Well, he's going to put two good scores together in almost every heat anywhere around the world. So that's saying something. Um,
What about at
my
Abu
que-
Dhabi? Does Leo put in a score at Abu Dhabi?
I think Leo gets sevens at Abu Dhabi, maybe high sixes.
I think everybody gets high sixes at Abu
Now people
Dhabi.
fall. People fall.
Well, that too, but I mean, I think anyway, we'll get to
Well,
that in a
so
minute.
but now that we've said what we've said about Leo, what's your impression on who's a better surfer, Leo or Ethan? And what's the
Oh, well, there's
separation?
no doubt that my heart is always drawn to Ethan Ewing.
So that's
He's
kind of
got
interesting, right?
he's
Like we
just got the
said all
most
yeah,
he's got that intangible sort of Tom Curran smoothness that you just, you know, you want your
we
kid to surf like Ethan Ewing.
we make
Basically,
a
that's the way
case
I always draw it back to what would you want your kid, how would you want your kid to look surfing?
we make a really solid case for Leo and why he's in second place right now and he deserves it and all that sort of thing. And Ethan's not. Ethan's way below him now. But when you just look at those two surfers, we know Ethan's head and shoulders above Leo, you know? And I think Leo would probably admit that
I
too.
don't even know if it's head and shoulders. I just think that the point of difference is noticeable. And it has nothing to do with anything Leo's not doing. It has everything to do with the way that Ethan presents himself on the wave face.
That's head and shoulders to me.
Well, again, let's talk.
um, so moving on slightly, a bunch of rookies had their first performance in this event. The one that stood out to me most was George Pitar. George Pitar looked so mature in his decision making. I think his surfing is really great too, but particularly his decision making in this event. He lost in the quarterfinal to Leo, but he took out a very informed Griffin Colapinto. When I was watching Griffin's waves, I was like, man, Griffin's on fire. Like he looks really, really in form going into the season, starting at pipe. But Pitar did the work and beat him. So I was impressed by that and made the quarterfinal.
Yeah, of course, the rookie that I'm a big fan of and that was impressive and was also expected. I think George Pitar wasn't necessarily expected, but
Yeah.
Alan Cleland Jr., anyone who knows the way he surfs and where he was brought up surfing knows that this guy knows everything about mean, powerful waves of consequence. And Alan Cleland took down Jack Robinson, and Alan Cleland surfing was incredible throughout. Just the comfort with the late drop, the comfort with the heavy situation. He's been there. He grew up in that situation, and so I'm so glad because Alan Cleland needed a result. And I would suggest to you that he got a pretty good result. He probably did.
Finished in the round of 16.
You know,
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, I'm
good.
sure he wanted more, but you certainly couldn't wash out early if you're out in Cleland at pipe, because now you got to go to Abu Dhabi. Like this is a tough ask, you
Yeah.
know. Speaking of
Well,
big guys on tour, Alan feels like a pretty big guy. I don't think he's tall, but he's I don't know. I don't know what their size is, but he's not a flyweight.
no. I want you to next show bring height and weight with you
I
with
know.
each of these guys. Do your research.
I think it's important. I really do. I
I
think
do
it's
too.
important.
So Allen finished in the round of 16. The other rookie that finished in the round of 16 was Vaughn, Huey Vaughn, not Huey Vaughn,
Joel.
Joel Vaughn. Um, Edward Grogia finished in the round of 32. Marco Mignot finished in the round of 32, as did Jackson Bunch. So those are the other rookies. Rookie update. Scott looks confused. Scott doesn't even know the names that I'm referencing. Those are all the rookies, Scott.
No, I'm just, well, let's see what happens. Well, let's see
Well,
what happens.
the good news for you is you survived with
I
Kelly
lost
Slater as
I
your pick.
lost the women though. I lost out. I think I had Aaron Brooks in the women's, and
Dude, I lost 75% of the survival league lost on the women's side. I had Betty Lou Sakura Johnson, which I just felt like was an absolute lock. Like, I don't know that there was a better pick other than Caitlyn Simmers, maybe. And she lost early, I think maybe even elimination round, or no, round of 16. So Aaron Brooks, this was the big shakeup, actually. We had so much hype focused on the women. Aaron Brooks lost in the round of 16. Moana Jones Long, Betty Lou Sakura Johnson, Vahini Fierro, Tatiana Weston Webb all lost in the round of 16. Sally Fitzgibbons made her way back on tour, lost in the elimination round, which is brutal to see. So big shakeups with those early losses.
yeah, you know, the surprise to me, and I guess this shouldn't be a surprise, was Tyler Wright. Like her comfort at pipe. I mean, granted, it wasn't huge pipe, but and I thought, by the way, I found myself wondering why aren't the women out on the really killer day? Like it
I
felt
know.
like we went back about 3 years as
It
far as, when the women get to surf versus the men.
Well, I think those early round losses for the stars that I just mentioned was a reflection of that. They were put out in mediocre surf, and the total heat totals for the winners were still low. They were under 10 points. So there just wasn't a lot of opportunity, and there certainly wasn't a lot of opportunity for the best surfers in the best waves to really showcase what they fine tuned their skill for. So that is, I think, a disservice to them. But to Caitlyn Simmer's credit and Tyler Wright's credit, they slogged through that and still put together scores to find themselves in the final, which again, they surfed a final with lackluster waves and they didn't really get opportunities. And I don't think they scored 10 points between the two of them in the final.
I think it's fairly clear that Caitlyn Simmers is the best, you know, like she didn't win the final, but if you had put that final out in the final on the final day, somewhere on the final day, I think Caitlyn Simmers absolutely blows doors against most anyone else she's up against.
Well, so here's the
She
question
surfed
is,
she surfed insanely good.
here's the question. Who's surfing on the women's side? Do you remember from this event?
Caitlyn Simmers, that's it. Thank you very
Without,
much.
without a doubt. And so her final or semifinal against Molly Picklum, I think it was,
Yes, that was a great heat.
but blow for blow. Like Molly's incredible, but Caitlyn has that that
Oh,
it factor,
yeah.
and then it's like Molly gets a wave and does a turn and claims it hard and she gets an 8 and guess what? She looks back, Caitlyn's on the next one. Caitlyn gets a 9, doesn't claim it. Just like outdoing her blow for blow and has this confidence and this poise and doesn't even care. Like does not even impressed with herself.
At the risk of sounding misogynistic, I'll say this, that when I used to watch women surfing backdoor pipe and they would pull into a section, I'd be like, not going to make it. Not going to make it. Based on past results, they had never, very rarely made it. And of course, there's not much for my memory to go on because they just haven't been able to surf out there that much. But Caitlyn Simmers, and frankly, Molly too, but Caitlyn's one of the surfers where I'm like, she's going to make this, and that's not the way I used to think about it. I used to be like, it's too bad. There's no way she makes it out of that, and now you're like, yeah, she's going to make it. Oh, and by the way, afterwards, huge rail grabbing, gashing roundhouse.
That's the point of difference with Caitlyn too is when Tyler won one of her earlier heats, it was a semifinal or a quarterfinal. She got a barrel that was a pretty good backdoor barrel, and then there was a mean section right there, and she was busy claiming it. Like she came out of the barrel and was just like, oh, looking at the beach, like screaming. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like there's a section right there, and then there's an end section. Like crack that thing. You know, why are you claiming this? This is going to be a 7 point ride. Crack
Yeah.
that thing. And so I
Coach
was kind of,
David.
I was bummed on her. And that's like any criticism that I have leveled at Tyler, which I feel like I have over the years, maybe it is a reflection of me. But I also feel like it's moments like that where I'm like, sick barrel, like I'm now coming around to you. But what are you doing claiming the wave when there's still more sections and it's only a 7? You didn't get a 10. You know what I mean? So there's moments like that as opposed to Caitlyn. Then you watch Caitlyn's heat and she's cracking it. Or what I mentioned, Barron Mamiya in the final when he got the 9.8, I think it was, where he cracks that section full speed. That's what we want to see. And to Tyler's credit, by the way, when she was in her post heat interview, being interviewed by AJ, she said, she goes, I think I got too excited. I just claimed that wave. I probably should have hit the end section on it. And it's like, okay, you're right. You should have. But those are the moments where I feel like there is a separation between Caitlyn and everybody
Excuse
else.
me. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Sorry, I had to bear with me.
So, anyways, Caitlyn in first going into the next event. I want to read you the men's top 5 or 10 going
Sorry
into
about
Abu
that.
Dhabi. We've got Barron Mamiya in first place, Leonardo in second, Ian Govea, we haven't even discussed, in third, Italo in fourth, Jake Marshall, your hometown boy,
Yes,
in
Jake surfed
fifth.
great.
He surfed great. And so, by the way, while we're on Jake,
Yeah.
I saw in comment sections people criticizing judges, feeling like Jake's buzzer beater should have been the score. I went back and I watched all this in real time and then I went back and watched it kind of after the fact. I think the judges nailed it in this event. I don't think Jake deserved the score in that moment. And it was very close, but I think the judges did a great job in this event. George Pitar in sixth, Miguel Pupo in seven, Kanoa in eighth. He was my survival pick, so I survived and I'm on to Abu Dhabi. Seth Moniz in ninth, Felipe in 10th, and our beloved Ethan Ewing in 11th.
I think if there's one disappointment for me, it's that Jordy didn't get through. I think he lost in the round of 32,
Hello?
but it's pretty incredible what he's doing in this heat. Like the one wave, his first wave of that heat was just mind blowing. Jordy Smith, but I feel like I think it was last week we were like all hot and heavy on Jordy, and I mean Joel Vaughn surfed great in this heat, but I guess I wish I would have seen Jordy get a little further on here. I feel like Pipe is an event where he's got to get a result. And speaking of big guys on tour, that Jordy, I don't want to say disappointed. It was just a beautiful heat. Like they both surfed great. The waves were good. It wasn't like he blew it. It's just that he didn't get this as good of waves as our guy.
It's a little heartbreaking to watch, to be honest, because I know I was rooting for Jordy too. This is what I was talking about with Ethan, where there will be moments throughout any season where things conspire against you. Don't let it weigh on your shoulders. Jordy needs to kind of shake this one off as quickly as he can because he really didn't do anything wrong. And he has all the talent in the world to be in the top 5 and even win the titles. So.
His first wave in that heat, he just gets a sick backdoor tube, just standing up, spit out, just a beautiful one. And the rounding, gaffing, huge roundhouse power Jordy Smith that you see is just like all hail Jordy. It was an incredible tube. Hey, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Okay, we're back. Spit talking surf.
Welcome back. So, coming off a pipe, Abu Dhabi actually starts in 2 days and 2.5 days, I guess. February 14th, wherever you are in the world. And do you have a survival pick for Abu Dhabi for the men's side?
I mean, I guess it's Felipe.
You're going to burn him early?
I mean, we're going to need some light flyweight person that's in really good shape. I think this spot actually tests your cardio and what kind of shape you're in.
Which is why I'm picking Italo.
Ooh, talk about a guy who could burn out quick.
He's
in good shape. He's in good shape. No, you're right.
He's in incredible shape. Way better shape than Felipe physically, if you just look at him.
Is Felipe
Felipe,
getting pudgy?
not pudgy. He's never had a lot of muscle tone though. But Felipe could win the event. Like Felipe is a great pick. I just want to save Felipe for a later event, and I'm less apt to use Italo at other events. And he's unbelievably consistent in wave pools. He's always finishing well. But the interesting thing, I don't know how much I believe this or if it's just hype, but hearing the commentators talk about Abu Dhabi and how it's different than Surf Ranch, they said the pacing of the wave is different. It's more critical for a longer period of time. So they're hyping it as if it'll be more exciting to watch. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Well, I guess my biggest thoughts on Abu Dhabi are, and they're not. I'm not really trying to make a statement here. I'm just kind of quizzing you more than anything. Is this, and this is away from the athlete performance. This is sort of a more global um, theme, I guess. Is this sport washing, or is this a chance to mend fences and show Abu Dhabi and some of these other nation states that don't necessarily have the greatest track record regarding human rights? Is this a good way to show them, that we're willing to come together and perhaps some of the way we treat people will be, um,
Infused into their culture.
yeah, like organically somehow. Yeah. But then it makes me think, well, wait a minute, maybe we don't have such a great human rights. maybe those Maybe with what's going on now, we're not the best ones to be waving the human rights flag.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think Australia probably is. Does this feel like sport washing? And let's just be clear, it probably is on some level. I'm sure that United Arab Emirates is like, here's a bunch of money, WSL. Thank you for building this wave pool. Not only that, we want to host an event each and every year using this venue. And we're going to basically make you whole for the rest of the year based on you just doing one event here.
I think that's more likely. Like realistically, this was a business opportunity for the WSL. The first business opportunity is to sell a wave pool, which they are in the business of, to be clear. Um, they own the technology and they're in the business of selling wave pools. So number two business opportunity is to this is a marketing vehicle to sell additional wave pools. So that's really what this is about.
But sport washing. But sport washing.
I don't think that the WSL is there with the altruistic or whatever intention that you're saying of like, we are going to infuse some of our, you know, cultural mores into this traditional culture. Like, that's just not the intention. And that's also insane to think would actually happen because this is a tiny, tiny business for Abu Dhabi.
Well, let me say this. 1980s, South Africa, apartheid, professional surfers made a stand. And some of them, it was costly, you know? Are there pro surfers that are willing to make a stand, or is all of that just like old hat? The idea
Well,
that somebody's going to make a conscious decision to just go, you know what they're doing to whoever, whatever marginalized member of their society, I'm going to make a stand or I'm not. I don't even care.
I don't think it's old hat. I think, but no, the answer is nobody's going to make a stand. But the difference here is that was a depressed economy those surfers and bringing tourism and all that was an opportunity to hold back potential windfall to that depressed economy. This is the exact opposite. This is Abu Dhabi is thriving and has way bigger business than any surf pool is going to possibly bring them. So in reality, they're the ones doing the WSL and quote surfing a favor by putting a wave pool here, allowing the company to come into their country and participate there. That's the
So
marketing
we have
point.
no leverage. What you're saying is we have no
No,
leverage, but that doesn't mean that um, some young woman that's a professional surfer can't stand up and go, okay, maybe I don't have leverage, but watch this. I'm out. I'm out and I'm out for these reasons. And I'm going to hold a press conference and here we go.
I would
CNN,
support.
where are you?
Yeah, yeah, I would. So that story has already been written. Those headlines have been written, and they're pointed at Tyler Wright. Tyler Wright is, as far as I know, the only out gay professional surfer on tour. And she's the one who has actually made political statements in the past and worn the LGBTQ plus IA plus badge on her singlet. And so she would be the one who would be in the position to actually make a stand. She has not done that. So that's her prerogative. And presumably she will show up at the event, especially being in first place now.
Yeah.
So, but
Wow.
I'm all
See,
for it. Like,
now she's got some leverage. When the first place surfer stands up and goes, I'm not doing this event for these reasons. Here's why. Let's hold a press conference. Blah, 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 blah. I just think first, a couple of things. Sadly, it'd probably be really good for the WSL. Like it would push them into like an international spotlight, which would, although they'd probably have to somehow try to save face with the, United Arab Emirates people, it would also do some really good.
yeah. Well,
You know.
so I think what would need to happen here is she would have to be very, very studied up on what that country's actual policies are and human rights record is, because you and I have talked about this just barely a couple of months ago. And immediately we got emails and messages from people saying, you guys actually got it all wrong. Abu Dhabi's incredibly forward thinking. Their history, like you Westerners are thinking that this is lumped in with all of the Middle East and everybody
Right.
operates the same.
Right.
Turns out each individual country operates differently. And within that country, there's 100 different cultures and subcultures that all have their own, whatever. And so it's unfair to kind of lump them all in together. And
Yeah.
so I really don't know enough to know what Abu Dhabi's specific track record is. And so Tyler would have to be very, very studied up and boned up on that to then hold the press conference to say the appropriate things that actually are a finger pointing of accusation and, not
Yeah.
misunderstanding one country for another, let's say.
Yeah. Maybe it's, yeah.
And maybe she has done that. And maybe that's why she hasn't done press conference and withdrawn from the event,
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think if she felt any real fear that her life she was going to be jailed or something, she wouldn't go. I don't think she
I'm
feels
sure
that
they
fear,
promised.
presumably.
I'm sure, again, you're right. You and I are, more or less naive to what's the actual situation on the ground there. So maybe this is not even a talking point right now.
Okay, but you're picking Felipe, to be clear, for Surfival.
Yes.
So
Felipe.
far, that's your pick?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going Italo.
Okay. Good
I
luck.
had Kanoa, as I stated. It really does add some excitement to the heat. Like I would not necessarily have been rooting for Kanoa in another without having had him as a pick. But when I'm watching him, I'm like, freaking, he was against Liam O'Brien. I probably would have rooted for Liam O'Brien because I like his underdog status. But in that moment, I was much more engaged because of my pick.
Well, I mean, look, I need 4 brand new Panda surfboards. So let's go.
There is that. I
Yeah.
just want to state too, for survival purposes, Joao Chianca might be a sneaky pick for Abu Dhabi. He finished 5th at the last Wavepool event, which was, I think, 2 years ago. And he's obviously coming off of the injury, so he's kind of like in the margins of people's picks, but I think he's good.
Okay. Nobody's picking Jow. Sorry. Good luck.
Okay. All right. Well, mark my words. We'll check back next week.
Yeah.
I had one other story I wanted to draw attention to because I just thought Jack O'Neill did a great job with research on this article on Stab Magazine about the Bentley driving bandits. Did you see this?
No.
This is a PSA for you and for everybody else. There was this organized crime syndicate operating in Orange County in LA they had 3 or 4 people on the beach or near the beach. One person would spot where you put your keys, where you stash your keys. The other person would be on the beach and they'd radio to one another and spot when you paddled out and, whether or not you came back in or whatever. So they knew how long you were gone. The third person would actually go snag the keys, unlock the car, take your wallet and your phone and your keys, lock the car, and leave. So now the surfer, when they eventually get out of the water, they can't get into their car. So there's this extended period of time where they have to somehow find a way to get into their car. And then that's when they realize that their wallet and their keys or their wallet and their phone is missing. In that amount of time, those burglars take your wallet, find out where you live, go to your house, ransack all of your things, uh, mainly with the intention of stealing technological devices, your phone being the key one. That goes to an expert hacker who is remote, and they hack into all of your financial institutions and steal your money. So this had been going on for an extended period of time. They got away with millions of dollars specifically targeting surfers. And this all kind of came to light when the filmmaker Logan Doolian, who makes the Snapped series of films, he's currently making Snapped 5. He was surfing river jetties near his house in Newport Beach, came in, stashed his key, came in, went through the exact scenario I said, got back to his house, everything was gone. He then finally he ran over to the bank physically and like finally got access and all that, realized they had stolen $150,000 worth of cash assets. They had ran up all of his credit cards in that time. He's in Newport Beach. They could go to Fashion Island and hit Gucci, Louis Vuitton, all this stuff. His mother had recently passed away. And so a lot of those funds were allocated for her funeral, which he wasn't then able to pay for. But thankfully, he had security cameras at his house and he got a couple of photos and images of the guy's face who entered the house. The police were able to use facial recognition to identify that guy and then ultimately figure out the entire ring that was involved, which was much, much larger. And the FBI had already been onto these guys. They just didn't have enough evidence. They didn't have the facial recognition. Amex had their own fraud team that was already onto this ring because they had seen these patterns happening. They just didn't have the information. And ultimately, 4 people were arrested, no bail, and they're currently in jail, awaiting whatever the next phase is.
Wow. I got a joke for you. You ready?
Okay, wasn't expecting that. Great segue.
So the FBI's hiring, right? And they've put out an application thing on LinkedIn or whatever, and they get all these applications, and it comes down to the final 3 people, and it's 2 guys and a girl. And the first guy goes into the FBI, and the FBI agent says, "Okay, this is your final test. You got to take this gun, go into that room, close the door. Your wife's sitting in a chair, and you need to shoot her dead." And the guy's like, "Holy shit, this is a gnarly test. You know what? I can't do that. I'm out." And the FBI agent says, "Okay, you're not the right man for the job." So the next guy comes in. He goes, "Okay, here's what you got to do. You got to take this gun. You got to go into that room. You got to close the door. Your wife's sitting in a chair. You got to shoot her dead." And the guy's like, "Oh man, okay," takes the gun, walks in there sheepishly, closes the door, and there's nothing, no noise, nothing. A few minutes later, he comes out. He's crying. He's just like, "I couldn't do it. I couldn't shoot my wife. There's no way I could do that." The FBI agent says, "Okay, you're not the right man for the job. See you later." The last candidate is a woman, and the FBI agent says, "Okay, you take this gun, go into that room, close the door. Your husband's sitting in a chair. You need to shoot him dead." She goes, "Okay." She grabs the gun, closes the door. First thing you hear is bang, 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 3 shots. Then you hear all this rustling and wrestling and furniture being broken and screams. Finally, the door opens and she's standing there. She's got scratches on her face and she's sweating. And she goes, looks at the FBI agent and goes, "Hey, the gun had blanks, so I had to kill my husband with the furniture."
Yikes.
What a great joke. Thank you, Scott. Oh, you're welcome.
Wow.
No.
Brutal.
Uh,
What does that say? What is the commentary on that joke?
it basically says, you know what? If you need something done, ask a woman.
Or is it there's an underlying vitriol for the husband in a lot of relationships?
Maybe a little bit of that.
Depends on the relationship. What about the Bentley driving bandits reminded you of that? Oh, the FBI's involvement.
Yes, he said
Gotcha.
it. No, that's a gnarly story. And I'm so glad that our friend from Snapped 5, I guess, did he get his monies back? Did he get it? Or
So that was also in the article. Yeah, it took a very long time and he was able to, but the problem was each individual theft was its own case. So like they used the card at Louis Vuitton, that was its own case. They used the card at Gucci, that was its own case. And he said Amex was actually the most difficult to get to return the money.
That's
But
interesting.
he did ultimately presume, I don't know if it was the full amount, but he got money back. This is just a PSA though for you and other
Yeah.
listeners. I a long time ago, not a long time ago, a couple of years ago, started using this what's called a fidlock, FIDLOCK, and it's hermetically sealed bag with magnets, and I put my key fob in it, wear it around my neck, slide it under my wetsuit, and it's actually up on my person. So the car is completely locked with no key fob around, because the stashing of the key thing and even the lock boxes that you could put on your car, the lock boxes are, breakable.
Yeah, I have one of those cars that has a code on the door, so I just
Oh,
leave my
yeah.
keys inside the car and just have a secret code, which is quite helpful.
Well, cover up that hand because there could be a guy 30 yards behind you with binoculars zoomed in looking at your code.
Wow. Yeah, that's okay. I'm gonna
Block that code. I've got a Duke of the Week.
let's hear it.
Kelly Slater for winning his 100th heat at Pipe just days before turning 53.
That's so great. What a great, can't say enough about Kelly Slater. He's just a incredible surfer, an incredible ambassador. We said everyone knows he's the GOAT and 53 years old. He gave a great post-heat interview when he beat Ethan Ewing. It was wonderful. And can't get enough Kelly Slater, quite frankly.
His surfing in that day before the finals day, unreal. I mean, that day we haven't even really talked about how phenomenal that day was in terms of waves, but Kelly obviously can elevate at the best waves in the world, and so that was so impressive to see. And like we said, 53 is just unreal to be doing what he's doing. So Duke of the Week, Kelly, congratulations, 100 heat wins at Pipe.
Yeah.
Um, my must see moment presented by Treeswax, treeswax.com for your the only petroleum free high performance surf wax. Clay Marzo has a YouTube channel and he only publishes every couple of months, but 2 days ago he put out a new edit at home on Maui and required viewing.
Okay. How do I access it? YouTube, Clay Marza subscription channel?
Go to Clay Marzo's YouTube channel on YouTube. And like I said, he doesn't publish that often, every couple months, but every single clip is like him doing clay things.
Guy's amazing. Such an amazing surfer. And I'm going to check it out. I'm a big fan. I'm
Yeah.
always engaged in YouTube. And speaking of which, the California Gold Surf Auction is happening in April, and we've got quite a few incredible surfboards from legendary shapers, Greg Knoll, Bing Copeland, Pat Curran, Dale Velzy, Jerry Lopez. We've got boards from all the legendary shapers and surfers, and it's going to be quite an auction. 48 lots, curated, selected, historically and culturally significant surfboards, the California Gold Surf Auction, and more will be revealed.
Amazing. Great. And then final note is waterwaystravel.com for all of your surf travel needs, of course. But then if you want to join Scott and I in El Salvador, April 1st through the 7th, and then Peru, Chicama, Peru, August 27th through September 3rd, those trips are available. I don't know how many spots are left. I need to get an update from the guys there, but they will sell out. And if you want to get in on those or at least get more information about the details, email me surfsplendor@gmail.com and I can provide those for you. And I just appreciate Waterways making this happen because the listener trip last year was such a highlight and I would never have the time or bandwidth to organize all of this. So them handling all of the organization is the way that this happens.
Yeah, come surfing with David and I. Enjoy the camaraderie. It was a heck of a fun trip, and we're going to do two of them this year, so it's going to be fun.
Yeah, super excited. Waterwaystravel.com as well. So, Scott, anything else you got?
No, that's about all I got. Until next time, David. Adios and aloha.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, bud. Talk to you soon.
See you next week.